What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. In the later half of Season 5, Riot has really begun to buff champions a lot more consistently than they used to, when before all you would ever see was constant nerf after nerf of whatever happened to be the strongest champion at the time, and the way they tend to buff things has been really interesting. As well, really quick, I want to give a shout out to the new channel I'm working on, Gaming Curios Community. I'll be making community compilations and uploading a new one twice a week, so definitely check it out. Anyways, let's get started. So a lot of times when Riot buffs a champion, they don't really increase their raw numbers too much, but instead what they do is give more utility to the champion. A good example of this was the buff to Lissandra in patch 5.16. Instead of making some of her abilities do more damage or maybe have better ratios, they gave her ultimate a pretty strong heal when it gets casted on herself. And this was a really interesting change to me because Lissandra was someone who I kind of felt needed just a raw boost in numbers, but instead she was given more utility. Now, of course, that doesn't mean this buff is wrong or not enough or that Lissandra won't be able to use it. It's just different. Different, and certainly a lot more exciting than giving her 20 more damage on her Q. And I'm not sure if it's going to make her a strong champion again, but at the end of the day, a buff is a buff no matter how big or how small. So that brings up the real point of discussion, the difference between adding utility or buffing raw numbers. When you buff a champion's numbers, say like their base damages, base stats, or maybe their ratios, it's a very systematic change that is a little uninteresting and unexciting, but it oftentimes won't do anything to fix the problems a champion has. And I mean, sure, a champion can be overpowered or underpowered based on their numbers, but not many champions are going to be truly balanced, meaning neither underpowered nor overpowered based on their numbers. Champions tend to be strong or weak based on inherent problems or lack of them within their kits, right? And so changing the numbers on a champion doesn't do anything to address their problems, unless their problem specifically is having low numbers in their kit. But on the flip side, buffing numbers of a champion can be a good boost if maybe you want that champion to have that problem in their kit. And I think that's where the philosophy of the Lissandra change comes from, when they decide not to buff her by fixing the problem of her having low numbers, but instead giving her more utility. Riot wholeheartedly intends for low damage numbers to be a problem that Lissandra has in her kit, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, it's quite healthy design and gives Lissandra somewhat of a utility mage playstyle that has to find ways to succeed without just one-shotting her opponents with a full combo. And so for a champion who has problems related to utility, buffing their numbers can be a good way to give them a nice boost without actually changing any of their problems. The Lissandra example is kind of the complete opposite, but I think you get the idea. If Riot wants a champion's problems to be low numbers, they should give them more utility. Or maybe if they want their problems to be related to utility, they can give them better numbers and give them a boost that way. And so adding utility means that you give a champion some power in a place that didn't necessarily exist before. It's certainly a much more interesting change, but it can also be a lot riskier and quite often has led to the overbuffing of some champions. Someone like Ahri in patch 5.2, Lucian in patch 5.12, and more recently Skarner in fact in the most recent patch 5.16 come to mind as examples of a champion who was very significantly overbuffed due to an increase of utility. Buffs that affect only the numbers of a champion are very concrete, very cut and dry, so it's easy to tell how strong the champion will be after the change. But an improvement of utility results in a lot of complex things and brings up a lot more balance issues and can and have in the past ended quite poorly, but it's a really good way to improve a champion who maybe lacks some strengths or maybe has too many weaknesses or maybe just has overall poor utility in their kit. And it also adds an added element of player choice to the kit. Continuing with the Lissandra example, the change to her ult isn't going to be useful sometimes, and in a lot of situations, it's not going to make a difference at all. But it can also be completely game-changing depending on how you use your ultimate now. So it puts a lot more power in the hands of the player rather than in the hands of the champion. And the fact remains that a large amount of the buffs recently have improved the utility of the champion, and Riot has been buffing champions in this way a lot recently. And it's a trend that I think we can expect to see continue, as there's a lot of valid reasons for changing champions in this way. And the main reason is because when it's done right, it's a lot healthier for the game. Riot doesn't want to make champions underpowered or overpowered. The goal behind any buff or nerf is to make a champion balanced, for them to have meaningful weaknesses, but also reasonably good strengths, and changing the utility of a champion does a good job of introducing strengths or maybe removing weaknesses, a whole lot more than improving the numbers of a champion will most of the time. And so it's a lot healthier design to change the dynamics of a champion than to make them just objectively stronger. As well, improving the numbers of a champion can sometimes cause some really unfair strengths in that champion's kit to be exposed. If someone like Poppy received a raw numbers buff right now, she would be totally insane, super unfun to play against, and create a really frustrating and definitely unbalanced gameplay experience. That doesn't exist right now because her numbers are objectively too low. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight to why Riot has been changing champions like this, because I think it is really cool and really interesting for them to take an approach that is a lot more complex and exciting than giving a champion 20 more damage on an ability. So what do you think about adding utility to a champion as a buff? Leave a comment, and thanks for watching.
Take some money, those are paper, keep in mind we just skip the ship well far along the way.